Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Miss Coffee here, and today we are doing a whip and chat. Whip stands for work in progress, so get out whatever that is for you. Work along with me as I tell you some stories of the children and their birth stories. Now, this video was highly requested. Now, I just have a question for the folks that asked me. One, I don't remember all of their names. There was like 6 people that asked me for this particular video all over the weekend, and I'm like, okay, my question is, did I say something? Did I do something? For some reason, I was continuously asked this weekend, which is not a problem. I rarely ever get requests for stuff to talk about in a whip and chat, so I will gladly take it. I was asked to talk about the children's birth stories. I guess they noticed that there was one for Minna, possibly one for Maggie, but not one for Orion. So I was asked to do a whip and chat of the children's birth stories. So I was like, all right, bet. Now, I will give you a heads up. There probably will be a lot of pausing in this video as I am in a lot of pain today. I am not feeling the best. I am waiting for my doctor's office to call me back. I snuck out of the doctor's office by telling them that I had some stuff I needed to get done at home and that they can call me if they need me. So if I have to pause, I do apologize. But we're going to get into these birth stories. But don't worry, I'm feeling fine. And by the time you see this, I will probably be on my meds and doing perfectly fine. They just have to switch some stuff around. Apparently, there's something going on with my kidneys again. And they're trying to figure out exactly what it is. So, I am relaxing. Don't worry, I'm sitting on a comfy pillow in my Snuggie. And we're going to do a whip and chat, okay? I think I can do a whip and chat. So, how you guys doing today? You guys doing good? Y'all doing well? I hope you guys are doing well. I think next week's whip and chat is going to be like a mental health whip and chat. I need to release some of the pent up frustration I have. So I think next week we're going to talk about mental health a little bit since May is mental health month. It's going to be May. Anyways, so let's go ahead and get into this birth stories of the children. And we're going to go in a row. Now, there is a couple of questions about the kids in the Q&A for this weekend coming up. So if I answer them here, I'll again, of course, answer them there. So as you guys know, or if you don't know and you're new to my channel, hey, I'm Miss Coffee. I have 3 children, 3 beautiful, monstrous children. My oldest is getting ready to turn 16. I know. I don't look old enough to have a 16-year-old. I know. I'm just joking. But my oldest is about to turn 16. The middle child is my son, who is getting right. Well, he just turned 11. I guess he can't get ready to turn nothing. And then there's little Maggie Pie. She's 9, getting ready to turn 45. So, let's talk about the kids' birth stories. Now, I'm not sure what I said or if there was something that just popped up into people's brains and a group of them all decided to all at once ask me about doing the kids' birth stories. But I'll do the kids' birth stories. So, let's start with Minna. Now, Minna obviously has a different father than my other 2 children. What happened was, right, I met Minna's dad. He was the boss of my first job. Yes, I said the boss. I went looking for work and came out with a baby. I don't know how that works. But Minna's dad and I were really good friends. We dated for a little bit. I got pregnant with Minna. Towards the end of our relationship, we tried to work it out. It, of course, didn't work out, but we were mature enough to be like, you know what, this ain't going to work out. We're going to have to co-parent this thing because we can't do it. So, we decided we were going to co-parent Minna, but we were going to do it in a different way where we allow her to make the decisions as long as she's old enough to understand the consequence of those decisions. So, Minna's dad and I have been co-parenting Minna since she was about 3 years old. So, let's talk about how, she came about. So, we had just moved from Harrisburg to where they currently live, which is about an hour away. And so I hadn't had any of my doctors set up or anything in where they currently live. And I'm purposely not saying where they live because I might have said it before, but I'm not going to say it now just for security purposes. And so we had just moved and Minna's dad, I believe, still had work down in Harrisburg. So he decided that he was going to go to work. And I told him, well, I'll drive you because I had to learn how to get back and forth because my family was still in Harrisburg. And 2, because I still had doctor's appointments. Like, I only had like a couple more doctor's appointments left. And I had already went into preterm labor with Minna. Minna's birthday was actually supposed to be June 26th. But I wasn't going into labor. And so I went into labor again with Minna on July. No, what was it? It was June 6th is when I went into labor the first time with Minna. It was too early for her to be born. I was like, I don't feel comfortable giving birth to her, today. I was scared out of my mind. Okay, Minna is my first child. I did not know what to expect, and I was scared out of my mind. And her father was very supportive. He was, the hold your hand. It's okay, breathe. But being a 20-year-old something, I wasn't very, excited about the thought of giving birth. But I had Minna the day or a month before I turned 21. So I'm sitting there, and I tell Minna's dad that morning that I was going to drive him back to Harrisburg because I needed to go to a doctor's appointment because, I wasn't feeling good. So imagine that. So we drive to Harrisburg. I drop him off at work. I go over to the doctor's office, and they do their normal checkup. I went into labor June 6th with Minna, and I remember telling the doctor, there's no way I'm having this baby today. Her birthday will not be 666. As weird as that is, her birthday should have been 666 because literally I started dilating and everything that day, and they stopped my labor because I told them it was too early, and I really didn't want to have a daughter with the stigma of the birthday 666 because so many people see it as negative. I think it's pretty cool, but so many people see it as negative, and I didn't want that negative connotation on her, especially since Minna's dad and his family are religious. So I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. So then I went into labor with her again on the 26th, but it wasn't progressing. And they were like, well, we're going to wait just a little bit longer. We're going to see how long you can essentially hold her in. I was pregnant with Minna for 41 and a half weeks before I gave birth. So the day I went into that checkup, when I dropped her dad off at work, actually her dad had a meeting, if I remember correctly. It was a meeting he had. I drop him off. I go to the doctor's appointment. They're checking me over. They're doing their normal routine. They're like, you have a lot of swelling. I tend to retain water. So I was like, all right, does that mean I can go home now? And the doctor's like, well, we're going to check and do an ultrasound just to make sure baby's okay. And I was like, okay. And, they're asking me questions, trying to make things less awkward because, they're sitting there, rubbing all over my belly like I'm a fortune teller cookie thing. And so the lady looks at me and she goes, oh. Now, one thing you don't want from your doctor is when they're looking you over to go, oh. No, what is that? Don't say that. Why'd you say that? Here, my fluid had gotten low. My amniotic fluid had gotten low with Minna. So they did an emergency transport, which was hilarious. They had to call Minna's dad. The problem was I had the car, so he had to have one of his coworkers bring him up to the hospital because, again, we were not expecting having baby that day. We had to bring his coworker brought him up to the hospital, and I was apparently I had been in labor for a few hours and didn't realize it, and I wasn't having like Braxton Hicks contractions or anything like that. I just was in full-blown labor. Like I was already like 4 centimeters dilated at this point. And they're like, we're going to have to do an emergency transport. Now, by emergency transport, because my doctor's office was attached to the hospital, they put me in a wheelchair and took me up an elevator and put me on the maternity floor. That was their emergency transport. And I'm like, really? I could have walked that way. Like, I could have walked up there. And they're like, if you walked, you probably wouldn't make it because you would have had that baby probably in the elevator. And I'm like, okay. That's another thing you don't want to say to a person that's pregnant that's never had a kid before, but we're going to just move it right along. So I'm sitting there. Minna's dad comes in. He's in a panic because, of course, this is his first child as well. And we're both sitting there like, what are we going to do? Blah, blah, blah. We're freaking out. And then finally, I'm like, dude, I am so hungry. I hadn't eaten crap all day. And if you've ever had a child, you know that once you go in there to have that baby, you are not eating again for at least 24 hours or until that baby pops out. Once that baby pops out, you can eat whatever you want. Until that baby pops out, you sitting there starving, watching your spouse eating and drinking in front of you, get mad as hell because all you can eat is ice chips. So I'm sitting there. And Minna's dad's talking about how hungry he is. And I'm like, stop talking about how hungry you are because I'm hungry. And if you don't stop talking about how hungry you are, I will eat you, sir. I will turn straight up cannibal in this place. So, next thing I know, like I had eaten like a whole cup of ice chips. And I was like, oh man, I really got to go pee. And they had me hooked up to all these monitors and such. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, excuse me, nurse lady person, ma'am, I have to go to the restroom. And she goes, no. I'm sorry. But did you just say no? She said no. And I was like, okay, can you tell me why I can't go to the bathroom? And she's like, well, you're hooked up to all the machines and stuff, and we don't want you to hurt, the baby, so you can pee in the bed. I am a whole grown-ass woman, ma'am. Okay? A whole grown-ass woman. You want me to, what? I'm like, nah, see, the way my life is set up, I'm a whole ass adult, and I ain't about to piss in this bed. You gonna have to let me get up, or I'm gonna get up when you leave. Either way, I'm going to the bathroom. And the lady goes, well, you're pretty far along in the, labor. I don't feel comfortable letting you. I'm like, either you will get me up or I will get myself up. And Minna's dad just kind of looks and was like, you might as well just let her do it. Because if you don't let her do it, she's going to make me do it. And then I'm going to feel bad because you're not telling her to get up. And I don't want to have, I'm like, see, and if you get him to start talking, he ain't never going to shut up. And so she goes, let me go ask the doctor. Okay. So she goes leave to ask the doctor and I get up. And Minna's dad's like, what are you doing? I'm shut up. I'm going to the bathroom, sir. So I get up and I drag that whole system that they have you hooked up to, including her computer and the stuff that's taking my blood pressure. I drag all that into the massive bathroom they had in my room. And I go to the bathroom. I'm like, oh my gosh, ow, that hurt. And Minna's dad's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, that's just, it feels funny. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, I get up. And the nurse goes, where did she go? Because the nurse came back in and was like, the doctor was like, he wants you to stay in bed. And I'm sitting there and I come out the bathroom and I'm like, that's all I needed. I just needed to go to the bathroom. And she goes, oh my God. And I'm like, well, what? What's wrong? Here, when I went to the bathroom, the reason why they tell you not to go to the bathroom is because when I went to the bathroom, I had given birth to Minna's head. Yep. Her head was just sitting there chilling. And so which Minna's dad had to pick me up, put me back on the bed, and one push later, there was my beautiful 9-pound, 1.1 ounce baby girl, Minna. That was fun. We ended up staying in the hospital a couple of extra days for some training, and, this was our first child, so we wanted to make sure we didn't go home and, hurt her. So we did some extra training and, all the extra stuff that they offer for you at the hospital. And so we ended up staying, I think, a total of 5 days instead of the normal 3. Mostly 2 because it was the weekend. And one of the nurses that I needed to speak with wasn't there. So I ended up having to stay an extra day, which is fine with me. And the insurance paid for it, so I didn't give a crap. So by the time we took Minna home, she was already in, I want to say, 3 to 6 month closed. She was 5 days old, and we just happened to go to Walmart for something because we lived down the hill from Walmart. Like, literally, down the hill from our apartment was Walmart. And so we had to go to Walmart to pick up something because we had just moved in, so we didn't have a lot at the house. And some lady looks at Minna, and she looks at me, and she goes, oh, what is she, like 3 or 5? She looks like she's about 3 to 5 months old. And I'm like, she's 3 to 5 days old. She's just big. She's a big girl. So that essentially is the story of Minna. She kind of popped out there. Again, I've never had children before Minna, so I didn't know what to expect. And I was like, well, that wasn't so bad. But then while I'm in labor, all I could think was, what kind of a person would do this over and over again? Like, I cannot. Like, once is enough. I will I remember telling myself, I will never do that again. I will never subject my body or my soul to such pain. Why would you do that more than once? And then I see people like the Duggars, and I'm like, look, listen, get off of her. No, this doesn't feel good. So that's Minna's birth story. Let's move on to Orion. We're going to move through these pretty quick, apparently. So let's move on to Orion. Orion is my 11-year-old. Orion is, he's kind of my sickly kid, but not really. He hasn't been sickly lately, just back when he was little. So when I found out I was pregnant with Orion, this is me and Mr. Coffee's first child. Before I got pregnant with Orion, I was pregnant already. I had been pregnant. It was say a month prior to me getting pregnant with Orion. I was pregnant with a child, and I ended up getting into a squabble at work where this guy pushed me, and I commenced to beating his ass. Not realizing at the time that I didn't know that I was pregnant until later that evening when I went out to the ER because obviously something was wrong and I'm bleeding a lot. And I'm like, I shouldn't be bleeding this much. And then they told me, you miscarried. And I was like, oh no. I was heartbroken, but I kind of didn't even realize I was pregnant. And I worked at it wasn't fast food. It was like a dine-in restaurant. And this guy had gotten into it with one of the other employees. I guess it was his girlfriend or something. And he hit her, to which I then hit him. And him and I started going at it. And when I was pregnant with Minna, I didn't show, like my belly didn't show until I was about 7 months pregnant. With that pregnancy, I was only, I want to say 6 weeks, and I wasn't obviously showing yet. So I obviously didn't know that I was pregnant. So it was I don't know. Like it was weird because I didn't know how to feel about it. And I felt bad because I'm like, I feel like I should be sadder than I am, but I didn't know. So I was left very confused and upset when that happened. And then a month later, like a month to the day later, I found out I was pregnant again. And I was like, how? We use protection. Because we used protection because I knew I wasn't ready to have another kid. Like Minna was enough. And Minna before that incident happened, Minna had been bugging us about getting her a sibling because she was tired of being by herself all the time. And I'm like, Minna, that's not going to happen. Well, then she decides at church that she's going to write a letter to Jesus, asking Jesus to send her a brother because she wants a little brother to play with outside that will climb trees with her. Well, apparently Jesus was like, I'll get you a brother, but him going outside, I don't know about that. So we found out we were pregnant with Orion. So Orion, when I found out I was pregnant with him, we were super careful. I ended up working at I worked at Macy's, I want to say, clothing store here in the U.S. And I really liked the job. The problem was, again, I started to retain water, like really bad. And so I actually had to go to the doctor once because I was like, the swelling is getting so bad that after my shifts at work, I would have to sit in our break room with my feet up, or in the loss prevention room with the security guard there, because he was a good friend of mine. He would let me sit in there with him. I would have to sit in there with my feet propped up for at least an hour to, between 45 minutes to an hour. I would have to sit with my feet propped up just because I was retaining so much water. And so I went to the doctor and I was like, what can I do? And they're like, they're going to have to let you sit down. Well, I tell my boss this, and my boss was like, nah, you need a prescription for that. I'm like, you're going to make me get a whole prescription for a chair? You bet your bottom dollar this woman made me go look a doctor directly in the retinas and go, I need a prescription for a chair. I then get said prescription for a chair because my doctor was like, why won't they just let you sit down? And I'm like, I don't know. I worked at the jewelry counter, so I very much could have sat down, but they didn't like you sitting down because it made customers feel like you were, apparently it made the customers look at you as if you were lazy. And I'm like, and I am lazy. What's the problem? Like, I'm still going to help them. Like, I didn't come to work to just sit here. And it's not like I'm sitting down because I just don't feel like standing up anymore. I'm hella pregnant. Like, with Orion, I started showing at 5 months. And by the time I was at 8 months, I looked like I was carrying twins. I had gained the most weight I have ever gained. I was at 257 pounds. And most of it was water. Literally water. And I remember the doctor telling me that, now that you've had the baby, you're about to see all the water. And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? If I looked at somebody running, I would sweat. I was just sweating water for 2 months straight after I gave birth to Orion. Anyways, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, I get the prescription for the chair. I take it back to my boss and I'm like, here's your prescription for a chair. They then tell me, no, they will not accept said prescription because it's dumb that a doctor would even write me said prescription and that I would have to stand or I would have to leave, meaning I would have to quit. So I did what I had to do, which was quit because I didn't have a choice. I'm hella pregnant. I can barely walk. I can't stand up for 8 hours a day like that. They wouldn't let me sit down. My boss was an absolute nightmare. And at one point, I was a nice person whenever I did have a regular job. But it's the fact that you can only be so nice before that mean streak comes out. And nobody ever asks how did you get to that mean streak. Everybody just points a finger at you and calls you a bully, apparently. So I'm just sitting there like, okay. So I quit the job. And I was immediately put on bed rest because my blood pressure wasn't doing too hot, which of course was stressing the baby out. And I'm like, of course he's stressed out. I'm stressed out. Now, up until I was about, I want to say 36 weeks pregnant, they kept telling us we were having a precious another little girl. Minna was fine with it, but she was like, I really wanted a brother, but whatever. And I was like, oh, well, I'm sorry that the cookie factory only made cookies with penises in them and not vaginas. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And she was just like, it's all right, Mom. Do better next time, okay? And I'm like, you know what? I don't get to pick this. This isn't something I get to choose. This isn't a Cracker Jack box. Like, what the hell? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, I'm on bed rest. And I'm talking about I'm on bed rest. Mr. Coffee is bringing me food and snacks and stuff I probably had no business eating, but I ate it anyways. And so then comes time for me to go to a doctor's appointment. It always starts with a doctor's appointment. Mr. Coffee at the time was working 3 jobs. He worked at a bar, he worked for a t-shirt printing company, and he worked doing something else with a friend. I can't remember. Hold on a second. Sometimes that pain kicks in and I'm just a little reminder that I need to go sit my tail down somewhere. But I can't remember the third place that Mr. Coffee was working. But he had 3 jobs. And I remember, you know, we still didn't have a lot of money for bills. We weren't spending it on anything extravagant. Like nowadays, like I could buy myself a thing of markers and not blink twice. Whereas back then I couldn't buy, I couldn't buy a thought. Like we were so broke. And so I'm sitting there and I remember I had to go to a doctor's appointment. Now, Mr. Coffee never went with me to doctor's appointments because he worked overnight and my doctor's appointments were during the day. So I did have a friend that would go with me just in case something happened. And so I'm sitting there and I go to my doctor's appointment. The doctor's looking at me. He goes, you're getting pretty big. And I'm like, yeah, I feel pretty big. My poor knees and ankles are praying for dear life to have the strength to hold me up another day because I've gotten so big. When you're on bed rest and all you eat is snacks, you tend to get a little heavy, okay? So I can't even say it was all baby weight. It was mostly me eating a bunch of junk food and sitting in bed all day, not doing anything, mostly because I couldn't. I couldn't even go to Thanksgiving dinner that year with his family because I had gotten so big that I just standing up for long periods of time or anything else like that, yeah, no, my back would start killing me. So I'm like, no, I'm just going to lay in this bed. So comes day that Minna used to stay with us when we lived in Pennsylvania. Like, her dad and I used to always stay. For some reason, we always seemed to move a block away from each other. So she could walk back and forth if she wanted to. And I remember telling, you know, her dad, you know, you might have to pick her up from school today because I might be giving birth to the baby today. And they, like I said, they told us that we were having a little girl. Now, I go in for my 36-week checkup. And this entire time, we're trying to come up with girl names. And I'm thinking like Savannah, Calypso. Calypso was my #1 name. And I had already settled on Calypso. But we had to figure out the other 2 names. So I'm sitting there and we're trying to figure out something cool like Minna's. Because Minna's name together is MEP. M-E-P. MEP. And Mr. Coffee has this thing with giving kids 2 middle names. And I don't know what it is. But our kids have 2 middle names. So we go in for the checkup and I remember he surprised me and showed up and I'm like, what are you doing here? And my friend was like, what are you doing here? And he was just like, I wanted to come see the baby too. And because he hadn't seen the baby yet because he works overnight. So I was all excited because he came to see the baby with me. And the nurse is doing the ultrasound and she goes, you know, is this Dad? I'm like, yes, this is Dad. She goes, well, Dad, you should be proud. You're having a baby boy. Or no, I said something. She's like, do you know what you're having? And I was like, yeah, we're having a little girl. And she goes, not unless that little girl has a scrotum. And I was like, what? What do you mean? I look up at Mr. Coffee because he's like standing in front of me. Like, I'm laying down. He's at the head of the bed standing there. And I'm just like, look up at him and I'm like, do girls have scrotums? And he's like, no, hun. I was like, then what is it? Again, never said I was the brightest crown in the box. Never said I was the sharpest tool in the shed. Moving right along. So the lady goes, yeah, that's not a cookie. I don't know I'm like, because we said we were going to nickname her Cookie. And they were like, yeah, no, I wouldn't. And I was like, so are you sure? And sure enough, in the ultrasound, you can see it clear as day. There's a little tallywhacker just sitting there flanging in the wind. And I'm like, oh, how did they miss a whole tallywhacker? Like, oh my God. But I can't say nothing because my aunt was supposed to have 4 boys and she has 3 girls and a boy. Apparently, it's very common to miss the tallywhacker on an ultrasound. I miss coffee. I can't have coffee right now. I have to go back to the doctor's office here in about 20 minutes. So, we're going to finish this and I'll get there when I get there. Anyways, don't worry. Don't fuss at me. I'm doing fine. I promise. By the time you see this, I am fine. I'm probably not even at the doctor's office anymore. I'm probably sitting in this house with these kids driving me nuts. So don't worry. I am fine. Just right now, I'm going to gripe about it because I'm mad because I spent my entire day in the hospital. But the good thing is I got to still watch the Johnny Depp trial. Anyways, moving right along. So I'm sitting there and we have discovered that girls do not have scrotums. Boys have scrotums. So we found out at 36 weeks pregnant that we were having a little boy. I was super excited because I've always wanted a little boy. Why? Because they're cheaper than girls. Write down in the comment section whether you have a kid or not. If you were to have a kid tomorrow, I know a lot of people would just say, as long as it's healthy and happy, that's all I want. No, you choose boy or girl. Write it down in the comment section. We're going to do a giveaway. So you write it down in the comment section. Just write a sentence or something like, I would have a boy or I would want a girl or something like that. Giveaway prize. Let's do one of the, and this is worldwide. Let's do one of the Johnny Depp cups since I just mentioned the Johnny Depp thing. We'll do a Johnny Depp mega pint cup. For anybody who writes the I would like a boy or I would like a girl. Don't give me the healthy, happy thing. We all want healthy, happy children. But if you had to pick a gender, which gender would you have chosen? I wanted a boy. I've always wanted a boy because they're cheaper. I remember watching my aunt dress her daughters for church, and you had to have the petticoat, and then the frilly dress, and then the hair bobblobs that go in her hair. Then you had to do her hair. Then you had to have, like, the bracelets and the necklace and the earrings and the shoes and the socks and the tights. And I was like, look, listen, with a boy, you put a suit on it, call it a day, okay? You comb his little hair, and that's it. That's all of it. Like, you ain't got to do all this extra crap like you got to do for girls. I'm like, I want a girl. So when I found out I was having a boy, I was super excited. And I was like, oh, my gosh, I'm finally going to have that boy I've always wanted. Not saying that I didn't want my daughter, of course, but I always wanted a boy. So Minna's like, you know, we get home from the appointment that day, and I'll never forget her face. She was like, so how's Sissy doing? I'm like, well, your brother's doing fine. I don't know who Sissy is. And she's like, huh, what? And Minna's dad looks and he goes, what do you mean? I'm like, apparently, our daughter has a scrotum. And he's like looking at Minna, and I'm like, not our daughter, dingus. Me and his daughter. And he's like, oh. Well, congratulations on your daughter. Hold up. What? I was like, yeah. It's not a girl. It's a boy. And Minna starts jumping up and down. She's so excited. Minna's dad starts, like, jumping with her. He's excited. I'm like, what are you excited for? Now, take it. Minna's dad and Mr. Coffee get along perfectly fine. They are, like, 2 peas in a pod. The bromance there is real. And I think half the time that Minna's dad likes Mr. Coffee more than me. And I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that. Just because Mr. Coffee, like, can put me in my place where Minna's dad could never do what Mr. Coffee can. And I don't know why it's this different. It just is. And so he likes seeing it, and he just thinks that Mr. Coffee is the coolest person on the planet. And I'm like, of course you do. Okay. Now, I said there's going to be a giveaway. Obviously, we know the rules. You don't say the word giveaway. You don't use the word giveaway or say thank you for a giveaway anywhere in your comment. The moment you say the word giveaway, you're automatically disqualified. And again, this is international. Anybody can do it. Tell me what gender you would want if you were to have a child tomorrow. We all know we want it happy and healthy. Choose a gender, okay? Anyways, so everybody's excited. So it comes time for me to have Orion. I'm on my way to another doctor's appointment. I get to the doctor's appointment, and the doctor says, your fluid is low. I'm like, imagine that. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's the same thing that happened with my first one. I had low fluid, so they had to, go out and do their thing. Well, they take me over to the emergency room, or to the labor and delivery department. I call Minna's dad to let her know to pick her up from school because I'm going to be, you know, in the hospital having the baby. And she goes, Mommy, can you have the baby? No, that was Maggie. Never mind. Sorry, moving right along. Sorry, the stories get jumbled and my brain memory isn't the best, so you forgive me. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right. So it was later in the evening, I remember, because I had him about 8 o'clock that night. So I was in labor most of the day. And the lady could see that every time I would have a contraction, I would start straining. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm pushing. And she's like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because I want to. My body is telling me to do that. So that's what I'm doing. She goes, don't do that. Why? And she's like, you'll make the baby come out. Isn't that the point? She's like, don't push. Okay. Yeah, that lady left that room. That contraction hit. I was like, push, 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 push. Oh my God, it hurt so bad. Orion, the doctor comes in, he checks me, he goes, you're crowning. I'm like, yeah, I know. Essentially all I did was push him down the birth canal. So the doctor didn't even have time to put his little outfit on, you know, that little get up that doctors put on so they don't get like blood and grossness all over their uniforms and stuff. They didn't have enough time to put that on before Orion had popped out. And when I say popped out, I mean like a Pringles count, like you heard the when he came out, like the like I'm not even joking you. I'm pretty sure there was a clear, and the room was quiet, so it was an echoey when he came out. Now, Mr. Coffee is holding my hand as this is happening, and once he sees his son pop out, he catches him like a Mr. Coffee should have been a baseball player. He just was like, pop, baby. And the doctor comes over and the nurses come over and they grab the baby and they're like, he's not breathing. And that's all I heard was, he's not breathing. And they took him away. I never got to hold Orion. I never got to look at Orion. Like, they just whisked him away. And I don't hear crying. And I'm looking at Mr. Coffee and I'm like, why is there no crying? I don't think I've ever been so scared in my entire life. And I'm sitting there with Mr. Coffee and they're like, she won't stop bleeding. She's going to hemorrhage if we don't stop the bleeding. And I'm like, I didn't even care who they were talking about because I was worried about the baby. And I was like, what's going on with my baby? Why won't anybody tell me anything about my baby? So these two nurses come up to me. They're on either side of me and they're like, you ready? And I'm like, I hear them, but I'm not paying attention to whatever the hell it is that they're doing until they do it. What they were doing is giving me shots of something in my thigh to help me stop bleeding from giving birth. And I was just like, what the flip did you do that for? Like, I was mad. And the lady goes, we got to stop the bleeding. I'm like, what bleeding? Now, obviously, I can't see what the hell they're looking at because there's a whole belly. My legs are still propped up. Mr. Coffee's still standing there with his mouth wide open. And I'm like, what is happening right now? So they're explaining to me, you know, your baby's having some trouble breathing. We're going to get him breathing, but we're going to have to take him up to the NICU. We're going to get you settled, but we first got to get this bleeding stopped. And I was like, okay. So they get the bleeding stopped. And they're like, your iron level's really low. We need to get you upstairs and on, you know, they were going to give me some kind of fluids and stuff. And so they whisk me upstairs and they get me settled about an hour or so later. The entire time, I'm like, where's my baby? I haven't seen my baby. And I'm like, telling Mr. Coffee to go find the baby. Because I'm like, they can't just take our baby. Like, where's our baby? Well, here they come in with the baby about an hour and a half after they get me settled in my room. The doctor comes in to let us know that Orion had swallowed fluid when he was delivered because he was delivered so fast. There was no, like, when the baby crowns and they tell you to stop pushing, it's so they can suction out the baby's nose and mouth to make sure it doesn't aspirate on what's in its mouth. And when Orion was born, he didn't go through that crowning phase where they could suction him out and then come out. He literally just popped out. So they didn't get a chance to suction him before he took his first breath, and he just essentially sucked in all that fluid into his lungs. And I was like, okay, so, you know, me being stupid, because I'm at this point, how old am I? See, Minna's going to be 16. Orion just turned. So I was 25, 26 when I had Orion. And so I'm thinking, why not just take a suction thingy, put it down his mouth, and then suction out the water, you know, problem solved. And the doctor just kind of looks at me like I was an idiot because I was asking idiot-like questions. And he's like, that's not how this works. Oh, okay. How does this work? Like, when do I get to see my baby? They bring the baby in. The baby has wires everywhere. Like, I'll never forget it. He has wires everywhere. His feet are all bundled up and taped with wires. His head had like a little cap on it, and it had wires all over his chest. His face was purple because when he came out, essentially, when Orion came out of the birth canal, he hit the pelvic bone on the way out because the way he shot out. This is why they tell you when you're in labor to not push, is because literally I was just smacking his head off my pelvic bone until he flew out. Okay. That's why they tell you not to push when you're in labor. So I feel really bad because I always blamed myself for the reason that Orion had the health issues that he does have, which is probably another reason why I'm such a helicopter mom to my kids, is because with him, it was my fault. And nobody can tell me otherwise. My dad has even tried telling me, you know, it's not your, it was my fault. I shouldn't have pushed. They told me to stop doing it, but I'm hard-headed and I can't listen to nobody, so I did it anyways. And so, yeah, that happened. So then they come in like an hour or so later because we asked, could we hold him? They told us no. They were getting ready to transport him. And I'm like, where's he going? And they brought in what looked like a lunch bag that used for thermal insulation, like that silver bag thing. And they drape it over the little bassinet that he's in. And they're like, we're getting ready to take him to Danville. We don't have the equipment here to take care of him. I'm like, what are we supposed to do? And they were like, you will be here until tomorrow. And then you can, like, I'm like, I want to go with my son. Like, you can't take my son and not take me with him. Well, they did. Because I had just given birth and they didn't want Mr. Coffee to leave me by myself because I wouldn't have had a way to get to Danville. Because at that time, I think we might have had more than one car, but I couldn't drive, obviously. I just gave birth. So they were just like, you know, you guys can go visit him tomorrow, but for tonight, I need you to sit back and relax. I'm like, I'm supposed to relax? You just took my baby in a helicopter. Like, what the hell? Well, the next day comes, they give us a steak dinner, and I was just like, I don't even like steak. Like, team no like steak. I'm not a big steak person. I do not like steak. So I was like, I don't give a crap about your steak. I'll take this steamed broccoli, but I don't give a crap about no steak. Can we leave now so I can go see my son? We left straight from the hospital, and you've never seen somebody who just gave birth recover so fast. We left the hospital, went straight to Danville, and got to see Orion. Now, Orion, they told us that we could have stayed in the Ronald McDonald house that was directly across the street, and we told them no. We wanted to keep that open for families that had bigger fish to fry, bigger problems with their children. I'm like, we only live about an hour or so away. We will make that hour trip gladly. Now, take it. Mr. Coffee at this point is still working 3 jobs, and he's the only one that can drive because I obviously can't drive. I just had a kid. So I'm sitting there and I'm just like, you know, we will do what we have to do. So we went up every day after Mr. Coffee got off his night shift job. We went up to go see Orion. We finally I got to hold Orion for the first time after he was born, 7 days after he was born. That's the first time I got to hold Orion. And I've always felt some type of way about that. Like, I felt like I didn't get the proper bonding I should have with Orion. But me and Orion have a pretty good relationship now. Like, it's not like, you know, it made me resentful of him or anything like that. It's just I wanted that, you know, that first initial, like you see in the Huggies commercials where they get the baby right away and the baby's all clean and happy and looks like it deserves like a photo shoot. And I didn't get that with Orion. So, like, we sat and watched over him for 7 days in a NICU. And I remember at one point they had pricked his little foot so much that they couldn't prick it anymore because there was no little spots to prick it at. The heel of his foot. And I'm like, he's never going to recover from this. Like, his little foot was so bruised. And I'm always the negative Nancy in situations like that. So Mr. Coffee's trying to tell me, you know, he'll get through it. He'll be okay. And out of nowhere, he just goes, Jub will be okay. And I'm like, Jub? Is that what you decided to name the baby? And he's like, no, that's just going to be a nickname. So that's where the Jub came from. I'm not exactly sure what it is still, but that's where it came from. We did decide, of course, on Orion's name being Orion, which is for the star constellations. Dominic comes from this guy that we knew from the bar that Mr. Coffee worked at. Sebastian came from Little Mermaid / the movie The Craft. I want to say it's The Craft. Is it The Craft? I think it's The Craft. No, Cruel Intentions. My bad. Cruel Intentions is where Sebastian came from. So the Little Mermaid and the guy from Cruel Intentions is where Sebastian came from. With Minna, Minna's name came from a Dungeons and Dragons book. Except for in the book, I think it's spelled Minna, but her dad just decided that he wanted to Mina. So it looks like Mina, but it's Minna. It's Minna. If you get it wrong, she will correct you, believe me. She is her mother's shop. Anyway, moving right along. So that's Orion's birth story. Shortly after Orion came home from the hospital, a friend of mine's came over with her daughter, and she wanted to see the baby. And I was so excited to show my friends my baby, because I was like, look, I have another baby. She had a baby as well. Her baby was about 6 months old. And what she didn't tell me was that the baby had just gotten out of the hospital. Like, legitimately, she left the hospital and came to my house. Her baby had RSV, which is a respiratory issue. And Orion had already had the problem with his lungs because he swallowed the fluid. She came over that afternoon. This was about, I want to say Orion was about 3 months old, I want to say. I think he was about 3 or 6 months old. Somewhere in that time frame, she came over right after her daughter had just gotten out of the hospital with RSV, and she ended up giving Orion RSV. Her daughter sneezed once the entire time she was at my house and gave my son RSV. We were in the hospital that day. He stayed in the hospital for yet another week. Anytime Orion's gotten hospitalized, it's always been for 7 days. And it's the roughest 7 days of my life because, you know, as a parent, you don't want your children sick or hurting. And to have your child in the hospital for 7 days, especially when they just got out of the hospital for however long, it makes you feel some type of way. Either way. So Orion had a rough start, but he's doing great now. We're getting ready to sign him and Maggie up for swimming lessons this summer. I'm super excited. They want to take swimming lessons. And we're going to be finding some other cool stuff to do for them for this summer. So the last birth story we're going to talk about is the Maggie pie, the crowd favorite, Maggie. Maggie, I don't even know what to say about Maggie, okay? Maggie doesn't need introduction. She is the princess of the house. Like, it's a Maggie. Like, she's a person, place, or thing. Like, she's a whole down by herself. Okay, I'm going to have to go soon, so let's hurry up and get through Maggie. Whew, sorry, the pain is getting pretty bad. But I don't want you guys to miss your whip and chat this week, so just know Miss Coffee cares about you guys too. Anyways, again, I'm fine. Stop fussing at me. So, so let's get to Maggie. Maggie was a surprise baby. I had gotten on birth control, and we had been using condoms still and everything, and somehow, some way, I was joking around with Mr. Coffee one night because I ate some Frosted Flakes and I got sick. And I rarely ever get belly sick. So I'm like, something ain't right. I think I'm pregnant. Like, I can feel it. And he's like, can you? I'm like, I can. Now, with each one of my kids, I didn't find out I was pregnant until I was about 10 to 12 weeks along. Because, again, I didn't show until, like, a little bit later, like, except for with Orion. So I told Mr. Coffee, I'm like, I think I'm pregnant. And he goes, you're not pregnant. I'm like, he's like, we're super careful. You're not pregnant. Well, sure enough, I was pregnant. And I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So we talked about what we were going to do. Because, again, we are two broke people with a son. And we took good care of Orion. But, you know, when it came to ourselves, no. There would be days we wouldn't eat. Like, when I tell you guys we came from nothing, we legit came from nothing. And so, like, there were days where we wouldn't eat or we didn't know where our food was going to come from, but we always made sure Orion had what he needed. Whether it be by 5-finger discount or not, either way, I did what I had to do to make sure my baby was okay. Okay. So don't y'all tell my dad. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, what are we going to do? I had talked about joining the military. We didn't know what else to do to get money. And they were like, your neck is too big. I'm like, you know what? F you, military. Not really, but I was mad at the point. So, you know, it is what it is. I have nothing but the utmost respect for the military and their and personnel and stuff. So please don't take that wrong. It was just, I was mad at the moment because we were trying to get money and they were not helping. Anyways, we also didn't tell them I was pregnant. So I'm sitting there, which of course they would have found out eventually. So we're sitting there and we're trying to figure out what to do. Mr. Coffee's like, I'm already working 3 jobs. I don't think I can do any more jobs. He rarely got to see Orion. And the only free time he did have, he was spending it with his friends or with Orion. Him and I we got into lots of fights because of it, because he was never around. And I'm like, now, great, there's going to be another baby. We're not going to be able to take care of it. You know, what do we do? We went through a whole slew of emotions when it came to Maggie. We didn't know whether we were going to put her up for adoption or if we were going to terminate or do whatever. One, don't judge me. This is my body, my body, my choice. If I wanted to terminate, I would have terminated. Obviously, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but, you know, we didn't know what we had. We didn't have a whole lot of choices. I decided one night that I didn't care what happened, that we were going to take care of this baby because we made this baby together. And I was like, I will not have a part of you being taken care of by somebody else. We are doing this. And I'm like, we will find a way to do this. And he says, all right, you know, I got your back. And I'm like, I got yours. We got this. Now, we didn't realize that having a third child was going to be, she added, I don't even know how to explain it. She added a little something, but it wasn't stressful. Like, when Maggie was a baby, she was the sweetest little girl. She loved Minna. She loved Orion. She was always, like, snuggled up with one of them. Minna always wanted to hold Maggie. They would always play together. They were always, like, the best of friends. And, I'm about to say, what letter am I doing? I'm doing 8s. And so when it came to me giving birth to Maggie, it was a pretty normal pregnancy. I did gain some, I did gain some weight, but then I also found out that I had, what was it, gallstones? I want to say it was gallstones, because a friend of mine was pregnant with me, which at the time she was my best friend. She was my best friend. She was pregnant, but she was due 3 months before me. And we both ended up having gallbladder problems at the same time. And she ended up having to have emergency gallbladder removal. And she never, to this day, she will not let me live it down, that she had to have surgery to have her gallbladder removed while she was pregnant. Now, if you remember, or if you've been here for the last year, I just recently had my gallbladder out, to which she then did call me to let me know that payback was a bitch, because she's like, now you know how I feel about having no gallbladder. I'm like, it doesn't feel any different. Like, I don't understand. It doesn't feel any different. But she had to have her gallbladder removed, and I didn't. I just had to watch what I ate. I couldn't have fried foods. I couldn't have soda, you know, that whole 9 yards. Couldn't have happiness, essentially. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, all right. Well, it comes day to have Minna or Maggie go to the doctor's office, where they're like, we're going to schedule you to give birth. And I was like, all right. And I was like, can we do it Wednesday? Because Wednesday, Mr. Coffee happened to have off work that day. And the doctor was like, no, it's my day off. We're going to go for Saturday. Saturday? I'm not getting stuck in here all weekend. Like, I'm like, can we do Thursday? And they were just like, no. We're going to do Saturday. And I'm like, I don't want to do it on Saturday. They're like, well, that's what time is convenient for our office. And I'm like, I don't care about your office. What about my body? Like, what's convenient for my body is to evict this baby as soon as possible. Like, were you not understanding, sir? So the doctor was like, well, and this is the week before I had her. So he's like, you know, we'll see you guys on, you know, Saturday next week. And I was like, whatever. I was mad because I was like, I'm ready to have this baby out right now. Maggie's pregnancy wasn't too bad. I didn't gain too much weight that I hadn't already had on me from Orion's pregnancy. So I was just like, you know, this pregnancy is a breeze. But when I was pregnant with Maggie, I could tell my body was just like, this is the last one that we're doing. No more after this. And I remember going in to get my tubes tied. Like, I went to go try to get my tubes tied, and that's actually, I actually had an appointment to get them tied. And this is right after the night that I found out that I was pregnant. And I was like, it can't be real, especially since I'm about to get my tubes tied. Sorry, again, my memory isn't the best, and bits and pieces keep coming back to me as I'm telling the story. And I remember the doctor telling me that I couldn't get my tubes tied because I was pregnant. And I was like, no, that pregnancy test was a fluke. And he goes, oh, you knew you were pregnant. I'm like, sort of, but not really. I wasn't. There's nothing to confirm it. And he's like, well, it's depressing. Why didn't you set up an appointment with your doctor? And I'm like, because you are my doctor now. Sir, you are my doctor now. So pregnancy was a breeze with Maggie. Come time for delivery, and that Wednesday I went into labor. Just like I wanted. I wanted to have her that Wednesday. I don't remember why, but I remember it was supposed to be that Wednesday that I wanted. And I think it was just because Mr. Coffee had off work. I'm thinking there was another reason why, but the only thing that can come to my mind right now is that Mr. Coffee had off work. So I was like, all right, bet. I'm going to go ahead and have this baby today then, because the doctor was like, well, we can stop it and wait until Saturday like we planned. And I'm like, or I can have this not dang on baby. So I went over to the hospital. Maggie pretty much did the exact same thing Orion did. She popped right out. Just boop. And Mr. Coffee again caught Maggie. And Maggie, he actually caught Maggie before she hit the floor. And from the moment he made eye contact with that little girl when he caught her, they have been pretty much inseparable. Sorry, my words don't want to work today. They've been inseparable ever since. Maggie and Mr. Coffee's bond is like no other. Like, it's the same bond that I have with Orion, which I always thought was really cool, is that Mr. Coffee bonds with the girls and then I bond with Orion. Minna has a unique bond with Mr. Coffee, where she doesn't call him dad. She doesn't call him stepdad. She calls him Jordan. When people ask her, you know, who's that guy? That's my mom's husband. That is my Jordan. He's always been either the fruit guy, because when she first met Jordan, which is Mr. Coffee, when she first met him, she said he smelled like fruit. I don't know what he was wearing, or if he was wearing cologne or whatnot, but she claimed that he smelled like fruit. So for like the first 6 months of her knowing Mr. Coffee, she kept calling him the fruit guy. And then she started calling, she's like, what do I call him now that you guys are married? Like, right after we got married, she goes, what do I call him? And I was like, you can call him whatever you want. She goes, can I call him my JD? And I was like, sure. Now, if you didn't know, JD is a nickname that Mr. Coffee's had since before I first met him. If you remember in the story of how I met Mr. Coffee, which apparently I will be telling again on Saturday. In that story, I let you know that I didn't know Mr. Coffee's real name. I always just called him JD. And it wasn't until right before we got married that his mom was just kind of like, no, his name is Jordan. And I was like, oh, he has a real name. Awesome. I probably should have asked him that. All right. So yeah. So Maggie, her birth was normal. She, you know, she didn't have any issues when she came out. She was a perfectly happy, chubby baby. Minna was 9 pounds, 8.5 ounces, or I'm sorry, 9 pounds, 1.1 ounces. Orion was 8.5 pounds, and Minna was 2 weeks late. Orion was 2 weeks early. Maggie was just on time. Like, Maggie came on her due date. So there's a lot of unique similarities with the kids, like their initials. If you, Minna, Orion, Maggie, spell out mom. Their birthdays all have the year and the day are the same. So 7/6/6, 2/11/11, 9/12/12. That was not planned. That just kind of happened. And then also with the two younger ones, or even with Minna, Minna's birthday, if you remember the reason why Minna's still in Pennsylvania, her pap, his birthday was a day after Minna's, or a day before Minna's, because his birthday was July 4th. Minna's birthday is July 6th, so they would always celebrate on the 5th their birthdays. With Maggie and Orion, their birthdays are a week or 2 weeks away from their aunt and uncle. So for Orion, his birthday is exactly 2 weeks away from Uncle Jesse, which of course you guys know who Uncle Jesse is. And then Maggie's birthday is 2 weeks away from Auntie Jocelyn, which is Mr. Coffee's sister. And so they have a lot of unique similarities, but that is their birth stories. I don't know if I left anything out, but that's how I gave birth to 3 beautiful children. But with that said, I am going to have to get out of here, though, because these people are still calling me to go back to get my medication and stuff and to get another test done. So I do have to go. But thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to answer the question of the video in the comment section below. If you missed it, watch the whole video all over again and then try to find the question. But with that said, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you ever have another topic that you want me to talk about, please let me know. I just be up here rambling on about what's going on in my life. You don't have to, you know, give me a topic, but it was kind of weird that everybody wanted me to do a topic on, like, the birth stories. So there's a very rushed, I'm sorry that it's rushed, but I have to get back to the doctor's office. There's a rush story of the birth stories. I hope you enjoyed it. With that said, if you're new to the channel and have never been here before, but you liked what you saw, hit that subscribe button. It costs you $0 to be kind. Also, hit the bell to be notified whenever I put up videos, because believe me, It's random. With that said, please remember to stay crafty, stay caffeinated, stay safe, and always try to be kind to others. Also be courteous, but always stay cool. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!